Welcome to another exciting episode of the Quest podcast with me, the Primal Swede. Today, this is the second podcast episode, right? And it's a shorter one. It's not a short episode. It's like half an hour. But it's kind of a special one because it's with my friend Mark Lorimer, a primal health coach based in the United States, in Wisconsin, around Milwaukee. And he reached out to me. Well, we've been in touch before, during, and after, obviously, the US trip, my LA to New York trip. He reached out to me after my trip and asked me if he could, ask me a few questions. And we decided, let's do a podcast out of it, right? So this is the result. And it was actually meant to be a podcast with like a video interview podcast, right? Where you can actually see the both of us talking. But someone, that is me, accidentally forgot to turn on gallery view when we did this in Zoom, right? So we can actually only see Mark. And so I kind of decided to let's you will see Mark, you won't see me so much. Actually, you will see me more, I suppose. But I added my own videos from LA to New York as B-roll. Okay, so that's it. So it's like a half an hour interview where Mark asked a few very exciting, interesting questions about my experience bikepacking across the United States. So without further ado, let's check out this episode, okay? Obvious episode 2 with the Quest podcast. Enjoy. Cheers. So finally, after a few months after having returned from the United States and my epic bikepacking adventure solo, coast to coast, going from LA to New York. In kilometers, I do have the distance in miles somewhere, like 2,500 maybe, but in kilometers, 4,268 kilometers in about 4.5 weeks. An awesome epic adventure now, right? Now I'm back, however, and I got this question from my friend in Wisconsin, Milwaukee, Mark Lorimer, who asked me, hey, Erik, the Primal Swede. Maybe you didn't say, hey, Erik, the Primal Swede. Maybe you did. So I have a few things I want to ask you, right, about the trip. So I said, sure, Mark, let's do a call. I'd be happy to answer those questions because after it's really good to reflect a bit on the trip after you actually done the trip. Now for my part, as I've been back a few months, it has been surprisingly easy to sort of, I'm just back in Sweden, everything is as it has always been, I'm doing what I'm doing, and then the US trip is kind of in hindsight, it's like back, it's been done, but it was like a really truly epic thing I did. So so I'm gonna welcome Mark Lorimer into this conversation with myself. So I suppose it becomes a dialogue instead. Welcome, Mark. I know you have a few questions, but maybe before I start to answer them, like, who is Mark Lorimer? Who are you, Mark? We met in Milwaukee, and we have some previous. We've done a few things together, right?
Yeah. So that's like Erik, if you know that we're both PhDs, and we kind of met through that community, and we've been kind of virtual friends online for since 2018 or 2019. So I was kind of excited to hear when Erik was planning to come over here so that we could potentially meet in person. His original plan was to go through an area of the country that was not near me in Wisconsin, but because of where my daughter lives and the time he was going to be here, we would be traveling and potentially meet somewhere in the middle for a little bit, and at least maybe long enough that I could find where he was camping out and just say hi or whatever. But as luck would have it, his plans changed a little bit as far as where his route was going to be, and he ended up coming straight through my city. So it says, "Hey, Erik, let's meet up," and took him out to dinner, and we had a great face-to-face, and it was really, really cool to meet him in person. He's just as cool in person as he seems to be online. So
Exactly. Yeah, I know.
there you have it.
Yeah,
And Erik did something that he's seen the country over here in a way that probably very few Americans have been able to see it or experience it in their own way. He was out there in the elements. He was through big town America. He was through small town America. He was on the highways. He was on the back roads. He was on bike trails. So he got to experience America in a way that very few other people have, especially myself, I know for sure. And so I had some questions for him. And so it was his first time to America, right?
Yeah.
If I'm
No,
not mistaken.
I've been in the US before actually.
Okay.
But nothing like nowhere near like the countryside in a sense. I've been to New York once, a few days, and like I stayed a few days in Las Vegas.
Okay.
5 days. And that's about it, you know, nothing like extensive anything.
Yeah. So anyway, so maybe Erik already, since he's had some experience in America a little bit before, but still, you know, I think just like Americans have perceptions of people from other countries like Canada or France or whatever. I was just curious about what Erik's, what kind of maybe perceptions he had prior to his epic solo adventure. And were those either supported or refuted, or maybe some kind of a mix of both?
Yeah, thanks, Mark. You know, you did send me that question in advance, like before, you know, and I was thinking about it, like what sort of ideas did I have about Americans before actually going to the US, right? Did I have any preconceived ideas? Did I have any assumptions of how the like Americans would be, good or bad? Honestly, I'm not sure. I think I kind of expected the people I met on the road to be quite open-minded and talkative, you know, because that's the rumor Americans have in Sweden and in Europe. Like they're kind of helpful, uh, generous, and they approach you and they can just talk, right? In Sweden, if you know, if I would be biking in Sweden and I would be in the middle of nowhere, maybe I would cross Sweden biking and I would meet another cyclist in the middle of nowhere. It's not necessarily a fact that we would actually stop and talk. You know, we would maybe just pass each other. Maybe we would greet each other, like waving our hands or something. But my impression is that in the US, it's quite different. People actually talk with each other, right? Like here, it can be quite frozen, you know, like Scandinavia, you know, Northern Europe. So I think that was the idea I had, and then I believe the idea I had of the people like in the big cities would maybe be a bit similar to Sweden, but you know, on the countryside a bit different, more like open. Yeah, so when I actually went there and actually met people, I think that is to some extent also what I actually encountered, right, Mark?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it wasn't like I had these ideas that you know, Americans is like super negative or something, and not necessarily on the other, you know, like you know, I don't know, like gonna be, I wouldn't say like super positive, like I was expecting things, but I think I was kind of open-minded to it, you know, like just find experience, and I'm sure gonna find some cool people to meet and talk with.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think, well, I can't say because I've never been in the shoes that you've been in as far as doing sort of an adventure, just meeting strangers after,
Yeah, but you know, I
day after
could.
day after day.
Yeah, yeah. But I could share. You know, actually, I had this once, and I was somewhere in the Midwest, I suppose. Maybe that was Montana, and I was kind of running out of inner tubes, and I was biking along this like, I think maybe along this interstate, like big road, and I left the big interstate, and I took to the right and kind of under the interstate, and I got the flat tire. I wanted to go like on a smaller road next to it, and it's kind of in the middle of nowhere, but from nowhere, like this big pickup came up, just stopped, and a woman walked out and said, "Do you need any help with anything?" You know, so I found those experiences quite often, actually.
Thanks.
Yeah,
Well, that's good to hear.
yeah,
So That's kind of actually a great segue into my next question. So, along your journey, you had many instances, like you just talked about, where you were running out of tubes and you had flat tires. You
Yeah,
had other equipment failures and malfunctions, right?
yeah.
So you probably found yourself challenged in ways maybe you didn't expect. So I'm curious, what did you learn about yourself from any of those challenges? And how might you leverage those going forward?
Yeah, it's a good one, Mark. I believe it's kind of in the same area as I've been before, in a sense that, when I was biking and I had my like inner tubes was running out, I like in Montana, North US, I also met like strong headwinds at time. A big challenge was when I was riding along these kind of country roads for 140, maybe like 180 kilometers, like straight, never turning left or right, just straight, straight, straight. It's like it's kind of a some like a negative brain massage. You know, you get kind of stupid. You get like it never ends. Time flies or passes, not necessarily fly. That time slows down a bit. And I had this once. That was the record distance. I did 270K in one single day, right? So I woke up. I did start my biking in the morning, maybe 6 a.m., and I ended up arriving at my destination at maybe 10, 11 p.m. And I was riding like straight on a straight road like this, like 100K, and then you turn left for like 10K, and then right, and it's like totally straight for like 50K. And then in the evening, the flies started to arrive from all over the place. It was crazy, and I had my headlights and stuff, and I could see like millions of mosquitoes and stuff.
Oh boy.
And obviously, this was also taking place. You're like, okay, I have so many in the tubes. I need to find some food. Maybe a gas station would be nice to have some coffee. So I think what I learned is that you can always overcome these challenges basically, right? But you need to be prepared like logistically, right? You need to have a few extra spare of inner tubes. You need to have a few extra batteries. You need to have good like navigation equipment. You need to have all those things, because if anything like fails, okay, you need to have a backup plan of the same stuff. So you need to have like two things of, gear, setups of everything. So you don't really end up in, like failure, like somewhere where you can't, get yourself out of. Right? So that is one part, like logistically. The second part is obviously like the mental endurance, as I see it anyway. Because it's like, Mark, when you do these, when you've done like 270K in one day, and the day before you did 150 200K, and the day before you did 150 200K, and the day before you did 200K, it's like you get a bit surprised of how well you can actually manage all those kilometers, even though you're tired, depleted, exhausted, fatigued. Right? You can go anyway. You learn a lot about yourself.
Yeah. So again, this is a great segue.
Yeah.
So I like how you just talked about the mental aspect.
Yeah.
And you think you said 4.5 weeks it took you to do this, but the example you just talked about is the straight roads that just go on and on and on, and time slows down, and the distance, the miles and kilometers just keep adding up.
Yeah.
So obviously you were able to get through that, but what do you think is what's the biggest takeaway you would think about getting your mindset in that place to do that, to meet that challenge and persevere and push through?
I believe it's like it's okay, let's say it like this. It's not like the first long distance ultra cycling adventure I'm doing, obviously,
Mhm.
right? So it's not the first one. I think it's a step-by-step process. Like you learn along the way. You know, that's my experience. So it would be cool to say maybe that, I never done anything similar. I never done any endurance stuff at all, like zero. And then the first thing I did was like bike packing across the United States, right? So, and then I learned all of these things from scratch. But that's simply not true. I think, I done my Ironmans, my ultra running. I bike packed similar thing from Spain to Sweden in 2021. 3,200K in 21 days, like 3 weeks. So I've learned sort of what it takes to actually push myself, right? So I remember when I was like in 2021, I was in North Germany, right? And the weather was splendid, like really like a beautiful summer's day, like quite hot, quite warm. And I had done from up to Hamburg like 200K in one go. Like that's pretty long distance, and similar thing set up. I did like 150 the day before, 200 the day before. So I was thinking, shit, I'm going to cross Denmark into Sweden, but I don't want to stop in Denmark for an extra day and to rest in Denmark because it's just the final stretch, right? I want to push through. So I decided I want to bike throughout the night. I'm going to Flensburg, northern Germany, up to the tip of Denmark, where I take the ferry to cross the sea to Sweden. So that's about 340K. So I decide I will go throughout the night. I will try it. I will see what happens. So I did. So on the first day, when the sun set and it got like pitch dark, and I had my lights and head torch and everything, reflected west. And I was biking in the middle of the night, and I can see like lights and small villages and stuff. It's quite extraordinary, right? To be there in the middle just by yourself, just challenge yourself on this epic thing. Can I actually reach the tip of Denmark and take the ferry to Sweden? Is that even possible? I don't know. And stop sometimes at the gas station to have some coffee, whatever it takes, just to push through, right?
Yeah.
And then in the morning, when the sun rose like 6 or something, and at 7 a.m. I reached the ferry port, and I see this huge ferry, right? So I actually did 340 kilometers, and I crossed one country. Like the country's a bit smaller in Europe rather than US. And I bike onto the ferry. And I remember how I sit on the ferry and I'm gonna send a message on my iPhone, right? In the middle of the message, I just fall asleep, exhausted. But I wake up, obviously, after 4 hours about. We arrive in Sweden. I bike off the ferry. I do some videos. I bike to my place, another like 13 kilometers. And I don't think I go to sleep. I kind of stay awake and do stuff, That's a long day. So imagine Denmark, like I've done that thing. Obviously, I know kind of what I'm capable of when I'm in the United States. Right?
So, so for the example you just specifically talked about,
Yeah.
your goal was to reach the ferry, right? So that means you have to be there before the ferry departs, right? So you have to get there, you have to get your ticket and wait in the queue and all that stuff, right?
Yeah.
So, so would you say that goal kind of motivated you to bike at a certain pace to meet that goal?
Yeah, absolutely. The ferry left at, if it was maybe 8 a.m. So my goal was to be there at 7 a.m., which meant, okay, I know the distance. I know my average speed. I know where I kind of have to be at what time. Obviously, I know sort of what I need to do. I don't know if it's possible, obviously. Can I actually do it? Whatever might happen. A flat tire, few flat tires, anything,
Right.
right? So yeah, obvious, but yeah, obviously I had a goal. So if you know what, and I found this in the US as well. When I had a goal, the days were always a bit easier, no matter the goal. Like if it was like today's goal is like 150K or 250K, and maybe I reached the goal, I didn't, but those days were always easy to do, rather than the days when I was tired and I was thinking, I don't have a goal for today, Mark. I'm just gonna bike and see where I end up.
Yeah.
Those days were always feeling like I don't know what I'm doing. Like, why am I on a bike? I want to sleep. I kind of lost direction. I didn't care so much.
Wow.
Like,
That
really
sounds
didn't.
that sounds like a great takeaway.
Yeah,
Things get easier with a goal. rather than
Yeah,
just
yeah.
playing it by ear, right?
Yeah, so I think that is a lesson I can apply. Maybe the one seeing this or listening to this clip as well. You know, if it's business or relationship, whatever, set the goal, aim for the goal. Maybe you hit the goal, maybe you don't. If you hit it, that's awesome. If you don't, it doesn't matter too much. You still have a goal, so you still have done something, right? But if you don't have a goal, you don't know anything. You don't know where you're going, and you
Right,
spinning around in circles.
right, or spinning your wheels or
Yeah,
whatever.
yeah.
So that's great. So here's the takeaway from that discussion
Mm,
is have goals. Just have a goal. It doesn't have to be a big goal, right? So maybe your big goal for to come here and bike across the country was to I'm going to go to the United States and bike from LA to New York.
yeah,
But that big goal is broken down into smaller goals,
yeah,
which would be like I'm going to bike this distance today or from this town to that town or whatever it is.
yeah.
And then you break those goals down even smaller. So that's great. So we learned that, or we just talked about maybe using goals to help make maybe daunting tasks seem a
Yeah.
little bit easier. So so we talked about things, that you've learned about yourself and that you can leverage going forward. But maybe you also learned something that does not serve you and you can leave it behind. Could you talk if there's anything like that you discovered?
Like you mean if I had some like I don't know, like IDs that I brought on the trip that I realized isn't no good for me, kind of.
Yeah, ideas or beliefs or anything like that. If there wasn't any, that's okay, obviously.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Maybe not. Maybe I don't know. You know, you maybe I can take it this way, like when you do one of these things or a similar thing, you do learn a lot about yourself and what you're capable of, obviously, right? So as I shared, but that also means you shed lots of ideas of yourself that simply aren't true, right? So you carry
Right.
ideas with you on a bike trip like this. Maybe that is, I don't know, what can it be? Fears, maybe, like I can't do this thing, or who I am. Maybe that is something I can share sometimes when I think maybe like at an every day on a regular day basis, we do our things and we tend to kind of forget who we are like deep inside, and our spark, what ignites us, and our passions and what motivates us and all of these things, right? And sometimes we tend to become like drones or something, we do we go to our jobs 9 to 5, and then we go home, and then we eat, and then we go to the gym, and then we sleep, and then we repeat, right?
Yeah.
And you carry those ideas with you wherever you are, until I believe you challenge yourself in a similar situation like this, and then you realize, shit, I love this. This is what I should do. All of those other things, it's kind of, I don't know, like external ideas from, society, whatever, that's not really serving you. So you shed lots of ideas that you have been carrying around with you from external sources, right? That makes sense?
It does.
Yeah.
Thanks for sharing. Um, so the last question I have for you is one that I did not send you in advance.
Oh,
So I know, and this was way earlier in the year
yeah.
when you had kind of thrown up that you're planning to come to the US.
Yeah.
And I had reached out to you at one point to ask if you knew what dates you would be here,
Mm.
to see if we could figure out how to meet somewhere on your journey, kind of like I talked about at the beginning. Um, and you replied that you weren't sure you were actually going to do it yet.
Yeah.
So I am super curious about where your head was at that point in time and what happened or what did you do to bring it back around the full circle to commit to this trip and then start the planning and training and all of those other activities.
Yeah. I this was at the end. A few reasons. one was kind of a very practical reason. This was at the end of the pandemic, the Corona pandemic. And as it was the end of the Corona pandemic in the US, there were still lots of restrictions of who could enter, who could not enter the United States. How many shots of vaccine had you taken and so on, right? Not my favorite thing to do, you know, the vaccine and everything. I know there are lots of ideas and opinions and controversy around should you or should you not, but it stopped me from taking a decision earlier because I just simply didn't know if I could enter the United States, right? So I had the idea maybe in kind of in January, February, something I kind of wanted to know, but then in the US, they kind of postponed it all the time. And, you know, yeah, it didn't matter if you took 1 shot or 2 shots or 3, like you had to be under like a vaccine program or something, right?
Yeah.
It was kind of tricky. So that was one practical reason. But it also gave me maybe a sort of an excuse to not plan the whole trip.
That's
I
right.
suppose.
Well, I can't go because they won't let me in.
Yeah. So I didn't know what to do because, yeah. Because I mean, I could have planned more thoroughly and prepared everything. And at the end of it, maybe if I couldn't go to the United States, I was actually thinking about crossing Australia, crossing India as well. But those countries never appealed to me. Kind of, I wanted to cross the United States. I was kind of in the middle of nowhere. And then was this like in January, February, March, April, May, maybe even May, they got rid of all the restrictions. So the United States became like most other countries. So I could actually go. So then it was becoming interesting, Mark, because then I really needed to take a decision.
Yep.
Because then it was real. Until then I had kind of, maybe, you know, I want to,
Right.
but you know. So
But
then,
they won't.
yeah. So then I kind of they got rid of all the restrictions, and then maybe a week afterwards I took the decision I need to do this, and then I bought the bike. And when I had bought the bike, I had made like an investment, like a financial investment, and then that was it. Then there was no turning back.
Cool. Yeah, I can see how, but I mean, between the time where they opened up the borders and you
Yeah.
pulled the trigger, so to speak, that
Yeah.
it was a very short time. You had to do an awful lot of planning. You had to book your flights. You had to get your gear. You had to figure out how you're going to get your bike and your
Yeah.
equipment and whatnot here. And
It's massive, Mark. It's like, you know, you prepare these things and maybe what you see, what you read about, it's kind of the adventure itself. But yeah, it took like, I don't know, weeks of planning. Like I planned the whole route. Like every
yeah,
you know, every 10K or something, I had the whole route planned, right?
yeah,
And the bike and the gear and everything. And yeah, and then as you know, and maybe for the viewer or the listener, you know, I had to change plans after a few days in the Mojave Desert due to the heat. So all of that planning just threw it out the window.
out the window.
But I did meet you, Mark, so that it had some positive, you know, effects.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to summarize my takeaways here.
Yeah.
So you need a goal. Doesn't matter how big or small, but you need a goal. And then you need to take action to support that goal, whether it be through planning or other goals. Or in your case, I would say even, you know, for this, you need the habits to be in the physical condition in order to do what you wanted to do, right? I'm not going to get up off my couch and say, "Oh, I'm going to go bike across the country now," and because it seems fun. But you know, unless you train for that, it's not going to go well.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, so I really enjoyed watching your reels and your posts, living vicariously through you as you were crisscrossing our country on your bicycle and
Yeah.
learning about your adventures and all of that stuff. So I want to thank you for sharing that stuff. And also, it was really great to actually meet you in person and enjoy a meal. Even
Yeah.
though we basically got thrown out of the restaurant because
Yeah.
they were trying to close and we're still sitting there talking.
Yeah, that's good. That's good.
Okay, well, I don't
Yeah.
really have any other questions for you. I
Yeah.
appreciate your time and
Yeah.
your
You
honesty
know,
and
thank you,
making the
Mark.
effort.
One final question for me to you then. Like, would you like to do something similar?
Yeah, and I think I mentioned this at the at the restaurant that if I were 20 years younger, I probably would.
Yeah.
I would have tried to figure out how to join you on your trip, but then it wouldn't be solo. So I don't know. But who knows? Who knows what the future holds? I do stay active and stuff. So um, I'm not going to say no.
Yeah.
But if it did happen, I doubt I would do it in one fell swoop. I'd probably do smaller chunks or whatever.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Thank you, Mark. Great to meet you. And I don't know. There is some people. Some will listen and or view this video. Do you want to share some? I don't know, like an Instagram handle or
I'm
something.
kind of not really active on social media. The only thing I do have is I have an anti-inflammatory living Facebook group. So if you're interested in living an anti-inflammatory lifestyle, you can always go and apply to join that group. But
what's the name of the group?
It's called Anti-Inflammatory Living.
Yeah, self-explanatory.
Right.
So listen to that, you listeners. Join Mark's group. Okay. Good. Okay.
All right.
Cool. Thanks.
Thanks, Erik.
Cheers.
Take care, buddy.
Yeah. And that is the wrap up for today's episode. Thank you so much for tuning in. You can find me on all main social media platforms such as Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, even on LinkedIn under the Primal suite. Okay, so follow me there for behind the scenes content from the podcast, but also where I share more info about nutrition, fitness, endurance, bikepacking, and all of these things. Adventure, right? About the podcast itself, make sure to subscribe and follow the podcast. I'm on all main podcast platforms like iTunes, Spotify, and so on, okay? If you're watching this on YouTube, make sure to subscribe to me on YouTube as well so you don't miss anything else I put on my YouTube channel. Okay. So now to finish this off, I really hope you got value and inspiration, and just one final thing. Stay strong, kick ass, and be a beast, my friend. Go after your dreams, chase your dreams, never give up. Cheers, bye.